Unveiling completeness. What if nothing was ever missing? Every sunrise, you awaken to a world where the pervasive feeling of something missing seems as natural as breathing, driving you endlessly toward new horizons. We spend our lives in pursuit, believing true contentment lies just beyond the next achievement or acquisition. But consider this. What if that deep-seated sense of absence is the most profound illusion of all, obscuring a completeness that has always, effortlessly, been yours? One might recall the relentless hum of existence, a pervasive, almost inaudible melody beneath the surface of daily life. It was a tune often composed of a subtle ache, a quiet longing that whispered of something just beyond reach, something perpetually absent. This sensation, familiar to so many, propelled countless individuals forward, each driven by an unspoken conviction that true contentment resided in the acquisition or attainment of that elusive element. Across lands and through the passage of seasons, this underlying current manifested in myriad forms. One saw it in the earnest pursuit of material wealth, where the accumulation of possessions was believed to pave the path to lasting satisfaction. A grander dwelling, a faster means of conveyance, garments of finer weave, each acquisition offered a fleeting warmth, a momentary cessation of the internal whisper. Yet as the novelty faded, as new desires emerged on the horizon, the familiar ache often resurfaced, subtly hinting that the newly acquired was not, in fact, the final answer. The chase then recommenced, fueled by the memory of temporary delight and the persistent belief that the next prize would finally silence the longing. Beyond mere objects, the quest extended into the realm of human connection and recognition. Individuals dedicated their efforts to cultivating relationships, seeking profound understanding and unwavering acceptance from another. The joy found in shared moments, in deep emotional bonds, could indeed be profound and transformative. However, when expectations faltered, when the dynamics shifted, or when the connection itself drew to a close, a particular vulnerability often surfaced. The very source of perceived completeness seemed to recede, leaving behind an exposed space that echoed the initial sense of lacking. This led to a renewed search, sometimes for a different kind of relationship, sometimes for deeper validation within existing ones, all to mend the perceived fracture. Then there was the fervent pursuit of achievement, the climb up ladders of various designs. For some, it was the ascent within a chosen craft, the mastering of a skill, the reaching of a professional zenith. The accolades, the recognition, the sense of accomplishment, these were powerful intoxicants. They offered moments of exhilarating triumph, convincing the individual that their inherent worth had been proven, that their existence was now validated by external measures. But even at the pinnacle, a subtle disquiet could settle. The question, "What now?" often emerged, sometimes before the echo of applause had fully faded. The very act of reaching the summit could reveal the vast, unexplored territory beyond, prompting a new climb, a new goal, always seeking to fill a space that seemed to remain just out of sight, regardless of external validation. Even in moments of quiet leisure, the underlying current of seeking was present. The swift escape into captivating narratives, the immersion in vibrant spectacles, the fleeting satisfaction of palatable diversions, these were adopted as temporary balms. They offered a respite from the internal dialogue, a momentary forgetting of the persistent feeling of not quite there. But the respite by its very nature was transient. As the screen darkened, as the music faded, as the flavors dissipated, the quiet longing, the sense of an unseen void, often returned with a gentle persistence, reminding one that the distractions were merely that, distractions, not solutions. This ceaseless striving, this intricate dance between yearning and temporary satisfaction, wove itself into the fabric of countless lives. It shaped decisions, dictated ambitions, and colored perceptions of self and world. It fostered a deeply ingrained narrative that something essential was absent, that one was somehow incomplete without an external catalyst. This narrative, reinforced by observation of others on similar quests, became an unspoken truth, an unquestioned premise. But within this grand, collective journey, a profound and unsettling question began to stir, softly at first, then with increasing insistence. What if this entire elaborate quest, this lifelong pursuit, this deeply held belief in an inherent deficit, was founded upon a profound misconception? What if the very act of searching for something missing was, in itself, the act that obscured an already present wholeness? This nascent thought, born from the recurring cycle of temporary fulfillment and renewed longing, represented the climax of an unspoken internal conflict, the ultimate questioning of a foundational truth. After the persistent hum of seeking, after the relentless pursuit of what was believed to be absent, there often came, unbidden, moments of profound stillness. These were not sought or earned through effort, rather they simply arrived, like a quiet dawn breaking after a long, restless night. In these fleeting spaces, the familiar ache, the subtle whisper of "not enough," dissolved entirely, replaced by an inexplicable sense of perfect accord, as if everything, exactly as it was, held its rightful place. Consider the artisan, deeply immersed in their craft, a ceramicist perhaps, with hands covered in clay, spinning a vessel on the wheel. In that precise instance, the world outside faded, the concerns of the morrow, the echoes of yesterday's troubles, the perceived deficiencies of their life, all receded. There was only the wet clay, the turning wheel, the shaping fingers, and the breath moving in and out of the body. In this focused engagement, the craftsman did not feel complete. Rather, the question of completeness simply did not arise. It was a state beyond needing, beyond wanting, a pure participation in the present moment where the self, in its usual seeking form, seemed to vanish into the act itself. This wasn't an achievement, but a momentary unveiling of an underlying unity. Or recall the individual who found themselves unexpectedly captivated by the natural world. A person walking a familiar path, their mind ordinarily preoccupied with plans or reminiscences, might suddenly be struck by the intricate pattern of a leaf, the way light filtered through the canopy, or the distant call of a bird. In that beat of absorbed attention, a quiet contentment settled. There was no conscious decision to be present, no effort to find peace. The mind simply rested, untroubled by its usual narratives of inadequacy or future desires. For that span, the feeling of being a distinct, separate entity striving for something vanished, replaced by a spacious awareness that was inherently whole, a seamless part of the vastness observed. It was as if the veil of personal seeking lifted, revealing a world already perfect and the observer within it. These instants also arose during the effortless flow of shared experience. Imagine two companions engaged in deep, authentic conversation, where words move freely, ideas exchanged without judgment, and understanding blossomed. In such a dialogue, the ego's usual defenses and projections softened. There was a profound sense of connection, a mutual recognition that transcended individual perceived flaws or unfulfilled aspirations. The need to impress, to prove, to acquire validation, these pressures simply evaporated. What remained was a pure, unadorned presence, a shared space of being where the question of more held no meaning. It suggested that true connection, when stripped of expectations, mirrored the inherent wholeness already present within each participant. Such experiences were not tied to grand events or exotic locales. They could emerge during the simple act of preparing a meal, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the mingling of aromas, the focused attention on the task at hand. They might appear during a moment of quiet contemplation by a window, watching rain fall, or while listening to a piece of music that resonated deeply, carrying one beyond the confines of ordinary thought. In each instance, the common thread was the absence of a subjective sense of lack. There was no striving, no longing, no feeling that something crucial was missing. These were not moments that one could consciously create or force. The harder one tried to grasp them, the more elusive they seemed. They often arrived uninvited, a grace note in the symphony of daily life, brief yet profoundly impactful. They served not as a destination to be reached through arduous effort, but as spontaneous glimpses into an abiding reality. They hinted at a truth far grander than the continuous quest, that completeness might not be an endpoint at all, but the very ground from which all experience arises. The seeking, then, was perhaps a temporary forgetting, a turning away from an ever-present, inherent state. These moments were not achievements of the self, but rather revelations of the self, as wholeness, unveiled for a precious, illuminating spell. The quiet moments, those unexpected passages of deep absorption or serene stillness, often hinted at a truth far removed from the clamor of daily pursuits. In such instances, the sense of an inherent lack, a perpetual striving for something just out of reach, would inexplicably recede. A quiet contentment would settle, not as the result of a goal achieved, but as a recognition of a state already present. It was in these interludes that the seeds of a profound reevaluation of human motivation were sown, suggesting that perhaps the very foundation of what one sought externally was in essence an echo of what resided within. If completeness truly lay at the heart of being, then the relentless pursuit of external validation or material acquisition, which so often defined existence, became a journey taken under a misapprehension. The conventional understanding of need had long posited it as an emptiness, a void that demanded filling from the world beyond oneself. This perspective fostered a continuous yearning, a belief that certain possessions, particular relationships, or specific achievements were indispensable to personal wholeness. One was taught, implicitly and explicitly, that satisfaction was a destination reached by accumulating these external markers. Yet consider the subtle shift that occurred when the intrinsic nature of completeness began to gently unveil itself. The anxious grip of want began to loosen. The urgency that propelled one to acquire, to possess, to control, stemmed largely from the deeply ingrained conviction of an internal deficit. This belief fueled a constant mental calculus of what was missing, leading to a perpetual state of future-oriented expectation. When I have that, then I will truly be content. The present moment, therefore, became merely a bridge, often fraught with impatience, to a hoped-for future state of fulfillment. When the illusion of lack began to recede, not through strenuous effort but through a dawning recognition, the very definition of a desire underwent a subtle alchemy. It was no longer a frantic grasping to complete an unfinished self, but rather an impulse that arose from a place of quiet abundance. The external world ceased to be a vast marketplace for filling an inner void. Instead, it transformed into a landscape for expression, for engagement, for sharing. The profound implication was this: if one was not fundamentally incomplete, then the fervent energies previously expended on acquisition could be redirected. What then truly motivated the human spirit? Perhaps it was the impulse to create beauty, not to gain approval, but because creativity itself was an overflowing of the inner wellspring. Perhaps it was the drive to connect deeply with others, not out of a need for validation, but from an innate capacity for empathy and shared experience. Perhaps it was the desire to contribute meaningfully to the world, not to earn self-worth, but because a complete being naturally sought to extend its inherent goodness. The pressure to achieve, often a heavy burden, frequently arose from the perception that one's worth was contingent upon external successes. If one's inherent value was not in question, then the act of striving could transform from a desperate struggle into a joyful unfolding. The path of endeavor became less about proving and more about experiencing, less about attaining and more about becoming. Each step taken, each skill honed, each challenge met, was not a means to an end of completeness, but an expression of the completeness already present. This silent revelation invited a re-examination of all motivations. Did one pursue a certain path out of fear of not having enough, or from an authentic resonance with the activity itself? Was the longing for connection rooted in a terror of solitude, or in a genuine appreciation for shared humanity? These were not questions demanding immediate, definitive answers, but gentle invitations for introspection, for a deeper listening to the subtle currents beneath the surface of everyday consciousness. The journey shifted from a frantic race to find what was missing to a quiet exploration of what had always been present. The focus moved from the anxiety of acquisition to the gentle recognition of an already present abundance. This change in perception did not negate the practical necessities of existence, but it recontextualized them. Shelter, nourishment, security, these remained important, yet their pursuit could be infused with a different quality, one less driven by desperate urgency and more guided by a calm intelligence. The mind, accustomed to its old patterns of seeking and craving, might at first resist such a radical reorientation. Yet the subtle power of this understanding lay in its inherent simplicity. It did not demand belief, it invited experience. It did not prescribe a rigid dogma, it offered a fresh lens through which to view one's own unfolding life. In this transformation, the profound truth began to emerge. The cessation of endless seeking did not lead to stagnation, but to a deeper, more authentic engagement with life, fueled not by deficit, but by an overflowing sense of being. The human journey often included a profound sense of aloneness, a feeling that frequently arose from the deeply held conviction that one was somehow deficient, a solitary fragment yearning for completion. If one believed themselves to be an incomplete entity, then interaction with the world and with others often became a series of cautious engagements, a continuous, often unspoken attempt to fill that perceived void. This belief in an inherent lack fostered the construction of subtle barriers, a protective casing around the individual experience, constantly wary of judgment, perpetually seeking validation, or guarding against further perceived loss. The self would then feel like a separate island, forever scanning the vast horizon for a bridge that might connect it to the mainland, to a larger sense of belonging. Yet with the quiet acceptance of an inherent wholeness, the very foundation of this isolation began to gently shift. The urgent need for these elaborate defenses started to dissipate. The protective shell, once deemed essential for navigating a world often perceived as competitive or scarce, gradually softened and yielded. This was not a weakening of resolve, but rather a profound strengthening, a deep rootedness in one's own being that no longer required external buttressing or constant validation. When one ceased to carry the heavy burden of proving self-worth or defending against perceived threats, a remarkable openness, a clear receptivity began to emerge. The perceived boundaries between the I and the other became less rigid, more permeable, much like the gentle merging of hues on a vast canvas. It was not that the individual ceased to exist, but rather that the sense of a strictly delimited, isolated entity gave way to a broader, more expansive awareness. One began to perceive oneself not as a solitary note striving desperately for its own melody, but as an essential vibration within a vast, harmonious composition. Each unique expression contributed its distinct quality to the richness of the collective, and the collective in turn sustained and allowed for the unfolding of each individual part. This evolving understanding naturally fostered a deeper, more spontaneous empathy. When another was no longer viewed through the lens of a potential source of personal completion or a perceived rival for finite resources, but as another manifestation of the same intrinsic wholeness. Compassion flowed effortlessly and without effort. Their joys and their sorrows were not merely observed with detached interest, but felt as a resonance within a shared field of being. The perceived distinctions, while still existing on a superficial level as unique forms, lost their power to create deep, divisive chasms. True belonging, then, revealed itself not as a matter of finding an external niche or gaining acceptance from a specific group. It was the profound recognition of one's unbreakable connection to everything, everywhere. One did not simply fit into the intricate fabric of existence. One was an essential, indispensable thread within it. Every action, every quiet thought, every gentle breath resonated through the intricate tapestry, impacting and being impacted by the dynamic whole. There was no outside, no periphery from which to seek entry or acceptance. One was always irrevocably, profoundly within. This transformative shift brought forth a sense of deep peace and inherent security, the persistent yearning for acceptance, the subtle fear of rejection, the often unconscious search for a place where one truly belonged. These diminished when it was understood that one's place was never genuinely in question. It was intrinsic, woven into the very structure of reality itself. The personal journey thus transformed from a quest for inclusion to a gentle, organic unfolding of one's unique contribution, knowing that this contribution was inherently valued, not for what it achieved or gained, but simply for what it was, an expression of the whole. The world, once seen as a fragmented collection of separate entities, each seemingly vying for its own existence, began to reveal itself as an intricate, living, interconnected system. The ancient forest was not merely a collection of individual trees. It was an expansive, breathing web of life, where each element supported and nourished the others. The unseen currents of the air, the timeless flow of the waters, the subtle rhythms of growth and decay, all spoke of an indivisible, intricate dance. And within this grand dance, the individual discovered their own essential rhythm, no longer battling against the current, but flowing with it, a unique wave within a boundless ocean. This was the quiet revelation of a seamless unity, a profound sense of belonging that required nothing to be gained, only to be recognized as already present. The journey toward recognizing an inherent completeness was not a path to a distant shore, but a deepening into the very ground of one's being. It was not about adding something new, but about unveiling what had always been present, often obscured by layers of conditioned perception. Once this quiet truth began to settle, the art of living transformed, not through radical outward changes, but through a subtle, profound reorientation of inner experience. Daily existence became less a series of battles to be won or voids to be filled, and more a flowing expression of an already whole, interconnected presence. The true integration of this understanding meant that actions and responses ceased to be reactive efforts driven by a perceived lack or a future aspiration. Instead, they began to emerge from a place of quiet knowing, an intuitive resonance with the unfolding moment. This was not a passive withdrawal from the world, but an active engagement that stemmed from an inner wellspring of stability. The frantic energy once expended on proving one's worth or securing one's place began to dissolve, replaced by a calm effectiveness. When one understood that their essential being was unassailable, the urgent need to control outcomes or manipulate circumstances lessened. Decisions would arise from a clarity that was unburdened by fear or attachment to specific results. Life, in its ceaseless dance, continued to present its varied tapestry of experiences, moments of joy and sorrow, success and challenge, harmony and discord. The understanding of intrinsic wholeness did not magically erase these fluctuations. Rather, it offered a different lens through which to perceive them, A gentle acceptance began to embrace the entirety of life's changing forms. The peaks of exhilaration were savored without grasping, and the valleys of difficulty were navigated without feeling personally diminished. It was recognized that external circumstances, however compelling or challenging, existed on a different plane from the unchanging essence of being. A storm might rage on the surface of the ocean, yet the deep currents beneath remained undisturbed. Similarly, the turbulence of external events could not touch or alter the core completeness that resided within. This allowed for a profound resilience to blossom. Setbacks, instead of being interpreted as personal failures or indicators of inadequacy, became simply facets of the ongoing journey, opportunities for deeper understanding or different avenues of expression. The inner compass remained steady, anchored in the unwavering awareness of one's unbroken thread of being. This resilience was not a hardened imperviousness, but a pliable strength, like a reed bending gracefully in the wind rather than breaking against it. It was a capacity to meet whatever arose with an open heart in a clear mind, knowing that no event, however significant, could fracture the intrinsic wholeness. To live from this place was to dwell in an effortless presence. The mind no longer constantly projecting into an imagined future where completeness might finally reside, or dwelling on a past where it was believed to have been lost, could fully inhabit the now. Each breath, each sight, each sound became a fresh experience, untainted by the filters of judgment or desire. This was not a forced concentration, but a natural state that unfolded when the constant inner chatter of "what's next?" or "if only" began to quiet. In this presence, the simple act of walking could become a profound connection to the earth. A conversation could become an act of deep listening, and even mundane tasks could be imbued with a quiet dignity. The inherent wholeness resonated deeply with the unchanging essence that permeated all existence. This was the profound belonging described earlier, not as an intellectual concept, but as a felt reality. There was a sense of being seamlessly interwoven into the very fabric of life, not as a separate entity observing it, but as an integral part of its unfolding. This resonance manifested as a quiet joy, a sense of profound peace that was not dependent on external conditions. It was the quiet joy of simply being, recognizing the boundless nature of one's own existence within the greater, boundless whole. This way of living did not involve striving for perfection or adhering to a rigid set of rules. It was a continuous invitation to notice, to observe, to gently return to the quiet knowing whenever the mind inadvertently slipped back into old patterns of seeking or feeling incomplete. It was a practice of gentle awareness, a cultivation of inner spaciousness, allowing life to flow through without resistance. The art of being, therefore, was not a grand performance, but a subtle dance, an alignment with the natural rhythm of existence, where every step, however small, echoed the profound truth of an unbroken, ever-present completeness. This quiet revolution in perception transformed daily life into a continuous revelation, a testament to the enduring reality of one's intrinsic and eternal wholeness. As we close this chapter of exploration, we are left not with an answer to grasp, but an invitation to witness. The tireless search for completion, once a distant echo, now reveals itself as a journey within, towards a truth always present. Perhaps the deepest satisfaction lies not in finding what was thought to be missing, but in recognizing that nothing was ever truly absent. This quiet understanding transforms the very ground beneath our feet, shifting our endless pursuit to a gentle dance. This profound reorientation changes how we navigate the tapestry of life. We invite you to continue this contemplation with us on the Alan Watts Echo. How might the recognition of your own intrinsic wholeness alter your daily interactions and the choices you make when faced with life's complexities? Thank you for joining us on this journey of quiet revelation. Until our next shared moment of reflection, may the echoes of completeness guide your path. Next time, we shall delve into the subtle practices that help sustain this inner awareness amidst the constant flow of outer experience.